In this episode, you'll see my top 10 picks for the best Atari 8-bit arcade games. Hey guys, back again with another top 10. Now, this is going to be my choices for the top 10 Atari 800 or 8-bit computer line arcade games. Now, again, these are my picks. Your picks may vary. In the previous top 10 8-bit games of all time, I chose my top 10. Some people love the choices. Some people added some games to that list saying, hey, you should try this one or that one. And some didn't like my picks at all. But that's why this is my top 10 list. So this is going to be my top 10 Atari 8-bit computer arcade conversions. Now, I was a child of the 70s and 80s, so I played a lot of arcade games. When my mom would take us to the mall, I would always just try to get some dollars from her and go play arcade games. And inevitably, I'd go broke and then come back and beg for more. I didn't care about the shopping part. I just wanted to play the arcade games. Because back then, the initially at the start, the 2600 wasn't even out. And even when I did get into 2600, I mean, the arcade games were so much better. So when I got an Atari computer line, I was really eager to start to play some of these conversions. And I think Atari had the best arcade conversions for the 8-bit line, partly because they owned the rights to a lot of popular arcade games and also licensed a lot of them. So it made it much easier to play arcade conversions. Sometimes there were some exclusives. So I think the Atari is the best 8-bit computer to play the old arcade classics. So let's go ahead and get started and get into my top 10. All right, so for my number 10 pick, I always like to pick a dark horse game. And my number 10 pick is Satan's Hollow, copyright 1982 by CBS Software. Now, this game, actually enjoyed it. I mean, it's kind of like a Galaxian Space Invaders type game, but as you kill the enemies, you can pick up little bridge pieces to build a bridge to get to the next level. And eventually, what happens is when you're playing the game, you get a chance to kind of battle Satan, and he spits fire at you, and you destroy him, and then you just kind of kill him, and then you rinse, repeat. And I always thought this game looked good. I thought it sounded good. I mean, it was a pretty good conversion of kind of a unique game, and that's why it's my number 10 pick. Okay, coming in at number 9, Mr. Do, copyright 1984 by Datasoft, programmed by Tim Ferriss. Now, this was a fun, kind of a unique arcade game, and I always enjoyed it. And I think the Atari conversion here is beautiful. I mean, the different levels, the color, the sound is great, the music is great. Everything about this port, I just really like, and it was a lot of fun to play it. So, it probably could have been a little bit higher, but for me, this is my number 9 pick. All right, coming in at number 8, Sinistar. Now, this is by Atari, and it has Jeff Milhorn and Kevin Sacher, who did the programming, and the graphics were by Gary Johnson. Now, this one was a really fun kind of flying game, kind of an asteroids type game, but where you could continually fly around. And if I remember right, there were models of this one where you could actually sit in, the unit. It was kind of a sit down like the old Star Wars game. They had stand up versions, but I'm pretty sure there's a sit down version. And they had like speakers behind you. And when Sinistar was alive, he'd be like, I live. But this one was a lot of fun. It was very unique because you flew around, you were shooting the rocks, you were getting those little tiny pellets, little energy things or whatever from the rocks. And then as you build enough of those, you could use them to destroy Sinistar. But I thought this was a well done conversion. The controls felt good, the game felt good, and it was just a really fun game to play. So that's why it is on my top 10. All right, coming in at number 7, Mario Brothers, copyright 1988, developed by Atari, with Sculptured Software doing the programming for them, and this was licensed from Nintendo. Now, this one was a lot of fun because in the arcade, it was one of those few games that supported multiplayers at the same time where you were kind of playing co-op. And this is brought through here to the Atari. Graphics are good. I mean, they're not like top notch, but they're good. The gameplay feels good. This is one of those games where you really need to play it 2 players, and you really need a good partner who can kind of make up for your struggles, and you can help them. So really enjoyed it. Love the 2 player aspect. That's why it's my number 7. All right, coming in at number 6, Joust. 1983 is the copyright, developed by Atari. Pete Gaston, Alan Wells, Steven Zemeski. Those were all the devs behind it. This is a great, great conversion. Again, now this is a number 6 game, but number 7, Mario Brothers, was a 2 player game. And this one is also, you can play together. A lot of fun to play together. Great game. I mean, just the sounds, the graphics, the gameplay, everything is there that I really would want from a Joust clone. I mean, could the graphics be done better? Sure. There could be always things done a little bit better, but this one just feels so good and it plays so well. I just love to pop this one out and get my wife or my son to play it with me. Really great game. All right, coming in at number 5, Frogger. Copyright 1982 by Sierra Online, and John Harris was the programmer. Now, I want to stress really quick, if you haven't read Stephen Levy's Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution, I really encourage you to check that book out. They talk about John Harris showing an early version of this at like a computer trade show, and he had his like discs, like his little disc pack or whatever, with all of his code and everything on it. I think he had all of his software, and it was stole from him by somebody. So he literally kind of almost went into depression because he lost everything he did for Frogger, and he had to basically redo it. But this is a brilliant clone. I love the game Frogger. It's just the simplicity is a beautiful. The music's good. The gameplay's good on this. The graphics, you know, this is a classic, and John Harris did such a beautiful job at Frogger. All right, coming in at number 4, Pac-Man, copyright 1982 by Atari. The developers are Rockland, and John Hellison was the programmer. Now, after the Atari 2600 debacle that Pac-Man was for the 2600, I remember as a kid going to get that with my father, and when I got it home and played it, I was just like, this is not Pac-Man. It was one of my most disappointing purchases. I mean, I played it just because, hey, it was a new game, but it was very disappointing. This one, however, is not. We've got the maze, we've got the ghosts, the colors. There's not that annoying flicker. The music, everything is just very well done on this. It just feels like Pac-Man. There's other versions like Miss Pac-Man that are done very well also. Pac-Land and different ones, and they're all really great. But for me, the reason this one cracks and is so high up on my top 10 is because it's the original, which always has a soft spot in my heart. So beautiful job on Pac-Man, number 4. All right, top 3, coming in at number 3, Gyrus, copyright 1984 by Parker Brothers. Now, this game was a huge favorite of mine as a kid. I loved it, and the conversion on the Atari is beautiful. Sound, the music, the graphics, everything just plays so well. The only knock I have on this game is I don't believe it ever supported the paddles, so you had to use the joystick. It's not the most preferred method to control it because it's not as nice as like a spinner. But it does work, and it is really good. And the game's fun. The music, like I said, is amazing. Traversing through the different warp points to each planet. And my friends and I, we used to always have to make the jokes. Whenever you warp to Uranus, there was always Uranus jokes. But this really amazing game. I love it. If you haven't checked it out, you should. It's a great game. All right, coming in at number 2, Defender, copyright 1982 by Atari. Michael Colburn was the programmer. Now, let me tell you, this probably was one of my favorite of all time arcade games. I absolutely spent so much money on Defender in the arcade. I literally loved it. The effects, the graphics, the explosions, and everything was just amazing. And I tell you what, they really draw all of that in so beautifully here on the Atari 800 version. Um, it's just so much fun. Smacking that space bar to launch your smart bombs or whatever. Just flying around, the graphics, the explosions. I mean, even though this is nowhere near as beautiful and crisp as the arcade, it was an amazing feat of programming in my mind for the Atari 800. So, coming in there at number 2, Defender. All right, and my number 1 pick for the best arcade game conversion on the Atari 8-bit computers, Donkey Kong. Copyright 1983 by Atari. Landon Dyer was the programmer. I've talked about this one in my previous top 10 8-bit games of all time for the Atari, but this is just such a beautifully done Donkey Kong. I remember playing Donkey Kong on my 2600, and it was okay, but the graphics and everything were really stepped down. And I had a cousin who had the ColecoVision, and their version is so much better, and it's still a very good version on that ColecoVision, which was very impressive for the time. But when I finally got an Atari computer, the 800, and I could play this version of Donkey Kong, I was so happy. The controls, so fluid. I mean, just running around feels good. Going up the ladders, I don't get stuck on them. The only negative, and it's the American version of Donkey Kong, the order of the maps, the levels is just not the way it should be. When Donkey Kong falls on his head, that should really be the last level. But for whatever reason here in the States, they flip-flop the levels around, I think, to make it a little easier to start. But I love this conversion. I love this game. This one is amazing. So there you have it. That's my top 10 Atari 8-bit arcade conversions. Now again, remember, these are my choices. Your choices might vary. If you haven't played some of these games and you got an Atari, I say look into them. If you're running them on an emulator, that's fine too. All the footage on here is done with an emulator. Usually for our Atari versus Commodore Battle series, I do everything captured from the hardware. But for these, I'm not too concerned about getting it off bare metal Atari. So I'm doing just captures through an emulator. But when some of these games will probably go head to head against the Commodore at some point, and we'll use the bare metal to do those. So hopefully you like this. Look for more Atari 8-bit top 10s. You know, we've got a lot of other genres and stuff to do. But this is it for this one, and we'll see you in the next video.